Our final speaker today is Maurice York. He is the Director of Library Initiatives at the Big Ten Academic Alliance. We're going to be talking a little bit about collective collections and the interoperability necessary. How do we enable discovery and how do we enable fulfillment of those requests? So Maurice, before we get started, I'll just give you a few minutes to introduce yourself, where you're coming from, give people grounding in terms of where we're going.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Todd, and everybody. Really wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me to the forum, and it's a pleasure to join such a great program. So thank you very much. The Big Ten Academic Alliance, just to give a quick sketch, it's an alliance of 15 R1 universities. The alliance spans a range of academic programs across teaching, research. Libraries are an integral and important part of that. Part of the most active support of the rich alliances that have been going across the Big Ten for about 15 years. And headquartered in the Midwest, classically, it's stretching from the University of Nebraska in the West all the way over to Rutgers in Maryland in the East. One of the most important initiatives at the center of our attention right now is the big collection, as we call it. So this started very naturally with the question of how do we take these 15 libraries and join their separate collections into one collection, shared and fully networked. Logically started with the print materials and has rapidly expanded to comprehend all materials, all formats, research data, all forms of electronic materials as well. The entire pool of knowledge available across these 15 universities to all students and faculty. Over 600,000 students and over 50,000 faculty altogether, about $10 billion in funded research. So my own personal background is that I come from, most recently, I joined the Big Ten Academic Alliance a little over a year ago, came from the University of Michigan, where I was the AUL for IT and government portfolio of digital content. Had deep experience in both digital repositories, as well as in digital content forums, ebook platforms, things like that. Far back in my background, I come out of classic preservation and conservation, working with the manuscripts and books. And so this scope of work really is a perfect sort of assemblage of the things that I pay close attention to and work with quite a lot. So it's really great to see this forum come together and the kind of topics that have been taken up today.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to dig just a little, just for background, a little bit more into where Big Ten is going in terms of its cooperative collections. There was a report published by OCLC, I want to say it was 19, towards the middle, end of 19. This is not at all a criticism because a lot of things screeched to a halt in February of 20. Where do things stand with that? Could you talk a little bit about that report, some of its outcomes, and where the BTTA is headed?
Absolutely. So that report, as a collaboration with OCLC, was an incredibly important touch point. The conversations about how we share our collections, the kind of affordances it brings to our students and faculty, this idea of joining our capacities across the Alliance. I've discovered actually the conversations stretch all the way back to the 60s when the Alliance was first formed. So we could also almost look at this moment in 2019 as a key pivot point in this arc of this conversation that has been going and building. Actually, it has been steadily progressing and building through ages of technology upon generations on generations of people thinking about how to do this and accomplish this. And it's sort of come to a moment where all of these are coming together in threads very nicely. So that report with OCLC was a fundamental touchstone that looked at what does this look like for the print collections of the Big Ten, and looked at it from a wide variety of really rich dimensions to say, let's study that question very deeply. That provided a seed to sort of go internally for the Big Ten and do a lot of studying in the year after that. What are we actually talking about? How does that work? What's the desired future that we're working for? And that research and all of that study resulted in then turning externally again, forming a steering committee and a project structure and all of those things like that. So we're just at the beginning of starting to form the strategy for how we operationalize the big collection. The pandemic actually had a profound effect on how we envision that, and rapidly accelerated a number of elements to say, what is the big collection in totality? What is its true scope, and what are we looking at? So we're folding all of those in right now and starting we have an innovation model for how we put that project into practice. The scope of it is enormous. The threads follow many and complex avenues, but bringing a central focus of attention. What are our lead priorities? Where are we building and creating first and foremost? And creating the pilot projects that start to bring that vision into reality. So that's where we are right now. And we know that this can go for a very, it's a durable vision, right? We build up this over a great deal of time, but right now focused on the immediate wins and values, and we can dive into what those priorities are, but articulated those and putting the project structures in place to start moving on those. And have already been making a series of investments in the kind of portfolio that we need to build for the big collection, and particularly going into open scholarship, open science, areas like that, as well as the things that we need to do within the print and the electronic collections themselves.
Right. I'm going to go through 3 different areas with you that I think are really critical to the success of this, and then just kind of dig into a little bit more. Those 3 being governance, then systems, and then hopefully some interoperability, kind of circle it back to NISO.
Absolutely.
So from a governance perspective, one of the challenges, and there have been many cooperative initiatives. Jill was on this morning talking about some of the challenges in a consortial environment. I would expect that one of the challenges that, particularly with Big Ten, because many of the institutions are land grant institutions, they're state institutions, that state funding, Michigan state funding might have a challenge, might be some legislator somewhere might be like, why are we circulating materials with Pennsylvania? Don't they have their own budget? Where are things setting up in terms of that governance model, in terms of, the resource challenges that, ownership across a collective, management of resources? Well, we send it to Pennsylvania, but it belongs to us. How are you dealing with some of those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some very interesting questions, as you're pointing to, questions of ownership, questions of moving from owning to holding to stewarding, what that looks like across, especially an alliance that's spread across such a geographic region as the Big Ten, spans across many different states, several regions of the country, which also means a number of different cultures, state laws, set aside, but also local cultures about for the faculty, for the students at the university, about the value of those resources, the quality of having them near at hand, and things like that. So what is truly important as we roll this forward is that this is an expansive gesture. It expands the total amount of resources available everywhere across the Alliance, and to have that as the lead idea and start to have these really important conversations about what ownership looks like, what type of, as you pointing towards, what type of governance is going to sit over those. So the key focus is to have conversations about commitments and agreements and what those look like. Eventually those will roll out to how does that interact with, so the great thing that the report you referred to that we did in collaboration with OCLC, that report was able to paint the rich picture of what were called adjacent networks, so adjacent lending networks, especially things like that. Each one of these institutions is very often not only the land grant, but the flagship institution for a state system. It looks a little different for each one of them, but a number of them are. And that has a whole complex set of related requirements and obligations and things like that. So it's actually, I think, a great advantage of the way that this alliance and these interlocking networks are constructed is that no one of them stands alone. They must consider their context, the local laws, as well as the principles, the governing structures of each one of the universities. So it does get very complex. And the core thing right now, the focus is the trust networks between the universities, and particularly between the libraries, and starting to use the foundation of those, which are a little over 60 years in the making now, as the basis of the kind of trust, the kind of commitments and agreements, and understanding what each part what each one can commit to the other, what you can count on me for, what I can offer to you, and that we use that as the basis to enter into conversations of, all right, so given the kind of, the state legislatures, the different laws and things like that, how can we appreciate those in the context of the core agreements and commitments that we've made with each other, and use those to craft, because they don't create rigid walls, they sort of create opportunities for how we think about this type of interdependence across, and it's creating a new thing, right? And often it hasn't been seen before. So I think where we're at is leaning into crafting those questions so that we can create build on the trust and create the strong bonds between, so that as we expand out from there and start interacting with the adjacent networks and the state laws and everything like that, that we've got a firm foundation for exactly what we're working for and how those external factors of the greater environment that we all sit in will interact with those core agreements that we've made.
Yeah, and just prior to this, we were talking with Sebastian about systems and interoperability within those systems.
Yeah.
From you mentioned some pilots, a roadmap of some things that you were going to work on. What are some of the key wins that you're looking for, and what are the key functionalities that you are finding in your systems that, like, oh, we really need to have that? What are the first couple of things you're going to kind of tackle?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of those lead priorities that absolutely in discovery. So if we're going to talk about the total pool of resources across all 15 research libraries and the kind of indices that we need in order to build, that's a core thing. So interoperable, my sense of the interoperability is to be able to do the glue between the different systems. So if we look at the if you will, the system stacks, the technologies across each one of these 15 libraries, what's absolutely true is that the local priorities and local strategies will govern where those go. So it is not feasible or a goal to necessarily hold at the center, if you will, looking across all of them, that, oh, if we just guide all 15 research libraries to go to one technology stack and then we'll have it solved. It's much more of a picture of what are the layers and the glue in between, almost the middleware, the infrastructure, if you will, is where we're focusing first. How do you build the infrastructure for interoperability and systems to talk across each other across the alliance? So the first is in that discovery of the total pool of resources and how we enable that. So a vision of creating the sort of the central indexing functions and the kind of things that can push the total pool of resources out into the local discovery environments of each, rather than trying to create one thing that everybody has to go to, something that can move out and push into local discovery environments and create a common user experience across those. And that we'll touch forward to standards. This is absolutely is dependent on those kind of standards of how that should look and how it will work, and how those various discovery systems will interoperate with kind of a central middleware, if you will, or infrastructure that's common to all of them. The other is delivery. means, rapidly anywhere, regardless of who owns. So touching back to this concept of ownership, it really opens up a rich new meaning of that, and regardless of where it's held as well. And we need to start taking up those questions and saying, it's much less, so on this topic of the discovery I was just talking about as well, it's less of a question, an implementation question. It's not a problem to solve. It's not something to go out and issue an RFP and say, we just need something for, please just put something in place for us. It's much more of a kit of parts model, that we know that what we need sits in this system and in this one and this one and in this workflow, in this practice. And it's a learning and discovery of how we find the right pieces and put those together. And assemble them into what we need. So there's a picture of coherence there, as well as of the interoperability. And we have to bring alignment and resilience into the picture as well. So that as we make small investments, so this is the innovation model and learning model, as we make small targeted investments and learn from those what works and what doesn't. And as we find what works, we deepen the investment on those and gradually take that to a point where we can bring it to scale. So in delivery, for instance, it's not necessarily a matter of trying to pick which delivery system is going to win, but which parts are we going to put together and start to explore what works to get to the vision of rapid delivery anywhere across the entire alliance that we're going for. Just to pick a couple of others, the lead priorities, there's knowledge creation, for example. So in that space, we're talking about open science, open scholarship, radically expanding publishing opportunities, advancing open scholarship, prioritizing freedom of choice for faculty as they publish, and things of that nature. It complements the resource question. It also goes to the faculty, to the publishing activity, to all of the rich services. So when we say the big collection, it's not just about the stuff, of course. It must be about the people at the center, always with the priority of how have we advanced the success of our faculty, students, healthcare providers across the wide range, scholars across the wide range. And then knowledge preservation is about most importance as well. So durable, scalable, open, trustworthy. These are research institutions after all, and we must carefully consider the task of preserving the scholarly record, the knowledge record, and take that into account as we look at every one of the systems, workflows, services that we're bringing into place. Is not just how do they serve today, but how do we sustain them in the long term? Who has access to those? How do those work? And are we creating something that is sustainable and durable?
Yeah. And you might not be there yet in terms of your thinking.
Yeah.
I was just kind of thinking of that middleware for just a second.
Yeah.
There are a variety of different ways in which that middleware could work. That could be a central store that everyone everyone pours into the hub, and then we spoke it out to the variety, or APIs, which just create nodes in a network. Are you thinking about exploring prototyping, test, fail quickly if it doesn't work, different approaches? Do you have any sense of the model that you're going to use in your development?
That's exactly it, is that rapid prototyping and piloting model. And there are several different approaches to how to do this. And that's the field of discovery that we have in front of us. So basically very much taking that approach and saying, we don't know which one of these exactly is going to work out. There are a number of different approaches. I also would say there's a combination of built systems that are built already, systems that we need to build, the glue between those that we need to construct. So as we're learning, we're also looking at how those interact with each other and what else we would need to put in place. So it's finding the wins. So each one of these is a practical implementation. How has that advanced us? What else could we do in the future? And doing a sort of that iterative and rapid prototyping kind of model. So we can set aside the things that don't work, and really deepen the investment on the ones that do.
Yeah, exactly. because I imagine there's certain things, certain functionality that, again, kind of getting into the standards questions, some might be more efficient, but there might be implementation barriers because of license restrictions and data use or
Yeah,
things along those lines. So again, it's not often the technology, it's the technology and the policy that need to go together to find a solution that works.
exactly. Yes, and that's to touch back to a couple of things we talked about. I mean, the report on operationalizing the big collection leaned into this in a very important way. It's been present all along as we expand out to say, okay, this is also about our digital repository, our digital collections, right? It's about our published collections and the university presses and what they're putting out. It's about the open or both the open and closed scholarship that our faculty produce. It's about our license collections as well as the purchase collections and the data that we own and things like that. It's these questions of governance of data, of where they sit, of how we have access to them and how we build them out, and policy. Absolutely always has to be there. So that goes to the commitments and agreements. Sometimes policy isn't quite the right word, right? Sometimes we're really talking about our practices and the way that we understand each other, because, let's say the university has policies and those sit at a high level. And so what we're talking about is our common way of working with each other and how we understand that works. And sometimes we need to recognize that then as there's a lot of foundational work to be done there. Sometimes there's quite a lot that others have done that we can pick up and put into place, but we have to understand how that feeds down into our local context and how we understand each other and work with each other already, and then where we have to craft new agreements. So it does require a new kind of thinking to be able to engage with those and see those as living processes, that are you can craft and shape. And this becomes about how we are collectively designing the future that we want to see, and how we're going to take what's before us, what we have, what is possible, and actively craft that into a shared vision of the future based on a shared understanding, shared policies, shared intentions, and shared language.
Yeah, which gets to exactly standards.
Yes.
There, NISO standards for circulation. There's NISO standards for discovery. NISO standards for, file formats. It seems to me that the Big Ten community is involved in the early stage development of a suite of necessary standards for all of these elements, everything from business practice and governance to, data exchange protocols. There, and even getting as far as the standards for the files that you're exchanging, right?
Yes.
EPUB and
Yeah.
data models for scientific data. This is broad in its ambitions. Is there a way, and we'll end on this question, is there a way that we, NISO, or the broader library community, the broader publishing community, can support where you're headed? Are there ways in which you can plug into our, feed your information, your knowledge and experience in this into, gaps in ILL standards, gaps in metadata standards? Or alternatively, are there ways that we can help you in pushing this forward?
Absolutely. I think that is an excellent question to hold and to keep foremost. So we should maintain an open dialogue, I think, is the most effective way that we can partner and collaborate, because we're going to discover those gaps. We're going to discover those areas. One that I met and engaged with for quite a while was in the you mentioned EPUB standards and in WebPub and things like that. And how are those standards being crafted? Who's at the table? What voices are at the table? Because that has a wide range of impacts, and libraries have a unique perspective as knowledge stewards for stewarding knowledge in the long term, as well as for questions of immediate access that bring a unique, as you know, a unique perspective to that. And within the Big Ten, as we start to push on some of those boundaries and start to discover new places, I think as we discover those gaps, and we have a wide range of really good people on NISO groups and panels and engaged in all of those conversations. And that we sort of look across those and maintain that open dialogue about, hey, we've discovered something over here. How do these connect? What can be done so that we can actively craft those and say who's at the table or who needs to be, or to open up doorways and pathways. It's going to be again, it's early days here, so I can't identify the specific areas where we need to, I mean, circulation interchange protocols are going to be of enormous importance, right? And we may need to use them in a little bit different way than they had been intended, or we may just be building on what others are trying to do. And that would be another place where we're connecting and saying that good work, and we'll be plugged in and everything like that. But that good work is already going on. It's just a matter of picking this up and putting this in place, and that we're maintaining a constant awareness of where those standards are and how they need to develop, and where we need to, where we have opportunities to open some doorways, both across the range of standards and protocols that we're putting into place. I think this really creates an opportunity to lead for both of our communities,
Yeah.
And to make sure that we've got those touch points. And that would be something that we should definitely lean into and talk, more specifically about how we can create those with intention. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things about a misperception most people have about standards. Things get written. We finished that. We did Dublin Core. We don't need to do anything more. That was done. Circulation standards. Those were done years ago. I mean, even ink and binding standards. These things change over time. Circulation changes over time. What our notions of circulation are changing, and discovery, all of these things need constant maintenance and need constant rethinking to stay abreast of current practice. And I think that's probably a great point to lean on, and end on. Maurice, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And congratulations on all of the work that you are doing. We're looking forward to working with you more closely on all of the things that you will be doing and where all of those efforts are headed.